Guys, welcome to the Greatness Machine. I'm your host, Darius Mirshahzadeh, and boy, do we have a special guest today. My main man, Jeremy Slate, is in the house. What's up, brother?
Hey, thanks for having me, man. I'm stoked to be here.
Yeah, so stoked to have you here. Hey, Jeremy, do you mind if I do just a little bit of housekeeping?
Yeah, go for it, man.
So listen to this is for listeners who are new to the show. The Greatness Machine, we're about two things. We're about people who are living their passions and those who are creating greatness in the world. And my friend Jeremy is neither short of passion or greatness. So pumped to have you here, man. Do you mind if I give a little bit of background on how we know each other?
Yeah, go for it.
So I met Jeremy fall of 2020, and I was in the middle of book launch mode. And my I was in like the process of trying to launch this podcast, but I'd done a live, I had a live show at that point. And I have a team up in Canada, Jay Wong from Podcast Your Brand. And he's like, I'm like, hey man, can you help me get some promotion for my book? Like I'm trying to get on podcast. So he hooks me up with Jeremy, and I actually did Jeremy's podcast. I believe do we do the Create Your Own Life podcast? Was that the one that I did?
Yeah, man. We really got deep on some stuff, man.
Yeah, it was such a cool experience. And so what I didn't know at the time, like I'm really new to podcasting and I'm really new to this whole like influencer game stuff because I had done time in like corporate, like building corporate businesses world. And so I didn't realize how big of a deal Jeremy was, that his podcast was such a big deal. But I figured out after the fact and saw that you had some really amazing guests on the show. And obviously you're a pro. And what's interesting is you know, when you're out there promoting or like you don't know any better, you're just like, oh, you know, if someone has a podcast, it's kind of like a big deal, right? Like this is literally like a naive person's sense, not understanding that not all podcasts are created equally. So I had a PR team, and they're getting me set up on all these podcasts, and yours came randomly through like one of my vendors that I was using. But they're getting me on all these podcasts, and I'm telling you what, man, I'm getting on these podcasts, and it was sketch. It was super sketchy. like I can't see their faces on the videos, and like they have weird backgrounds. They have like messy bedrooms in the background. This is in the middle of COVID, right? So like this is early enough in COVID where you didn't have a ton of people bulking the trend of like a lot of people were still staying in their houses like in the fall of 2020, right? And so probably, I don't know, I probably did like 20, 30 podcasts. And at the end, I was like, man, I really need to be careful. They're like, again, not all podcasts create equal, but again, like one of the first ones I did, you'll love this. The first one I did was John Lee Dumas, and the second one was you. And then, and then it was like all downhill from there. Right. So I got spoiled, man. I got to do your podcast and John Lee's Dumas's podcast, and then a bunch of rant. And then after I told my team, I said, hey, we got to go research these podcasts before I go on them, because this is like, it's an hour of my life I can't get back. But yeah,
well, here's the wild part about it. Just to add a stat to that, you know, like 95% of the podcasts out there get 100 listens or less.
Oh yeah, I believe it, man. You know, we have a mutual friend, Halataha, right?
Mm-hmm.
And she's doing a bunch of stuff for me right now, and you know we're paying to promote this show, right? I'm doing media buying for the show, and you know probably like you know before this, like I was getting like my podcast numbers were not, they weren't like that, but they were still pretty low before I started paying to promote it, because there's so much noise out there, right? You know, there's so many podcasts, but to your point, like how do you know if there's 100 downloads or 1 million downloads? Like it's hard to, I mean, 1 million you're going to know because it's a show. Everyone's going to know the show, right? Because there's not a lot, but even the difference between like 100 or 500, right? There's, you know, a lot of shows don't get 500 downloads, to your point. Mm-hmm. So yeah. So for me, I started doing stuff like looking at their social profiles and you know, I wish Apple showed the number of subscribers. They don't, but yeah, that was a really cool experience. And we got to know each other and spend some time together, and it was very helpful for me, and I appreciated getting to spend time with you and getting to know you better. Do you mind? What I'd love to do is give your formal bio, because we like to kind of teach the audience, for those people that don't know you. I'd like to read your formal bio, but I always like to start the show by giving really our origin story of how I know my guests, because generally speaking, I know my guests from some walk of life. Is that cool?
Yeah, go for it, man.
Yeah, guys. So look, you know, Jeremy Slate is the creator of the Create Your Own Life podcast, the show that I was on with him. He studies the world's top performers, man. You have some really cool, people on your show, and we'll talk about some of the people you've gotten on there. I'd love to hear, how you've made that happen, because I think you really bring some great guests on your show. Jeremy specializes in using podcasts and new media to create celebrity, and has been ranked the number 1 in iTunes new category and number 78 in iTunes top 100, which is like nearly impossible to do. Inc. Magazine named you one of the top podcasts, number 1 podcast to listen to actually in 2019, and Forbes named you one of the top influencers. And after having success, you and your wife Brielle founded the Command Your Brand to help entrepreneurs get their message out by appearing as guests on podcasts. So you're all in on podcasts, man. And we're going to be talking today about your new book coming out on June 21st, entitled Unremarkable to Extraordinary. So, man, I'm so excited to have you here. Brother, thank you for coming.
Hey, dude, I'm stoked. Like I've been checking out your content for a really long time. I know we had the interview as well, and I gotta say, man, that the thing I love most about what you do is all the karaoke videos you put up, like of you and guests. Like those are some of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Yeah. So yeah, it's funny. Yeah, I've been testing the show without karaoke.
I was wondering if I was gonna have to have something ready for today, like have my best Justin Timberlake or something like I don't know.
So about 2 months ago, one of my mentors called me up, and he's like, and he's in his 70s, and he's a really smart guy. And I'm not gonna lie, before that, I was thinking about reconsidering doing it, because I actually like doing it. I love singing to guests. Is fun because they're like, it's different and it's a little weird and it kind of breaks the ice. But he's like, hey Darius, do you consider yourself a serious person? Now, dude, he's in his 70s, right? So he comes from a world where, dude, singing on public to people you don't know is probably pretty weird, right? So I mean, it's still weird probably in this world, but and I said, yeah, I said, I just want, I'm concerned people aren't going to take you seriously. And I said, oh, that's an interesting perspective. And so I said, I'm going to toy around doing the show without a little karaoke. But yeah, it's kind of funny, man. When I sang do you know who Chip Conley is?
I've read his books. I don't know him personally though.
Yeah, he wrote a book. He wrote a really famous book called Peak, and he was Brian Chesky's direct advisor from Airbnb. So he was basically like the mentor for the CEO of Airbnb. And he had a really famous hotel brand called Joie de Vie Hotels in California. It was the largest boutique hotel firm in the entire North America. So he's really a successful guy. And so I'm singing karaoke, and I look up, and he's like checking his text.
Oh no.
And I was like, and it was like early on when I was doing the show, and I was like, oh, that's pretty funny, man.
Yeah. No, man. What's life without a little insouciance, though? Come on now.
Exactly, dude. So man, I'd love to take a step back and educate the audience on your origin story. A big part of Greatness Machine is, how do people get to, the whole thing is people are living their passions to create greatness in the world despite the odds, right? Like it's hard. Yeah. We live in a world that beats you down when you try to stand out, right? And it's one of these places where it's like it's hard to do what you want to do on your own terms. And so I do think there's an element of taking risk and getting after it, especially as an entrepreneur. Now, the inverse of that is we are also in a world where there's the biggest opportunity to ever do that, but it still takes that getting after it mentality. I'd love to hear your origin story. Do you mind kind of take us back to the beginning?
Yeah, it's I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur, frankly. My background is I got a undergrad degree. I'm a double major in Catholic theology and Judaism. Go figure. I got my master's in early Roman Empire propaganda, which, let me tell you, that's really fun. Kind of looking at the world now through the eyes of knowing how emperors convinced people they were God. That was fun. And then I went to New College, Oxford, and did a literature program there. So it's I've been the ultimate kind of nerd, and I really didn't see myself being in the entrepreneur world. From there, in 2012, I actually ended up teaching high school. Wow. I was teaching high school right out of school because in 2011 it was a really rough economy, and which is funny because you look at now's economy and it's rougher. But it was a rough economy at that point in time. So I couldn't get a job, man, because I had a master's degree. So I'm overqualified for everything that's entry level. And then I'm underqualified for, the PhD level stuff that I wanted to get into. My original goal was to be a college professor. So I'm teaching high school for a couple of years, and it was rough, man, because I've always looked like I'm 12. So I'm like trying to teach high school kids, and I look like I'm in the same grade as them. So it was just kind of rough, and I wasn't used to smartphones or anything like that. So my whole day was them trying to like get me angry and then put me on YouTube, since YouTube was getting big at that point in time. So like I just get home and I'm like, I
Wait.
can't.
Wait, these little fuckers are videotaping you and putting it on YouTube?
They were trying to see how red they could get my face or how angry they could get me. And I got loud a couple times. I'll be honest with you, man. And like they would try to see how far they can push you and then get it on video every day.
Wait, how old were these kids?
Sophomores, which that's where they're not scared enough to be freshmen yet, but they're not juniors where they have to take life seriously yet.
Oh, it was funny. Like you just reminded me when I was probably freshman, sophomore. And I mean, look, none of that's new. Just the way you piss your teachers off is different, right?
Yes.
So I'm like, yeah, we used to try to. I mean, I think we used to remember making our teachers cry, But as a guy, is it like I went to high school. How old are you? You're in your 30s, right?
I'll be 35 next month, actually.
Yeah. So I'm a little, I'll be 44 next month. So I'm like about that 9-10 years older than you. So I was in high school in the 90s. You were in high school in like the early aughts, right? And dude, I mean, in the 90s, like, dude, I started high school in 1992. That means like the people like I was in elementary school in the late 80s. So, like it was not unusual for like corporal punishment was not that far removed from my high school experience. So like
It's a Catholic grammar school, man. There was still corporal punishment, even though there shouldn't have
been. Yeah. So like when I was in high school, dude, like they would like our teachers would make us do like wall sits and shit if we they would like our basketball teacher would be one of our teachers, right?
My wrestling coach used to make us do these things called, and he was our math teacher too, so he'd get mad at me. But he used to make us do these things called walrus crawls. So it was like you do an army crawl across the parking lot, and it would like destroy your knees.
Yeah, which is insane, right? Because it's like you're like, that's asphalt, and this is my skin. So yeah, I know what a walrus crawl is, like up on your hands.
Yes.
Right? Yeah, but your feet are like kind of like
dragging flat, behind, right? You. Yep.
So yeah. So it's like the kids these days, you can't even give a kid a bad grade anymore, or else their parents screw you up.
Well, that was the weirdest part. So the school I was teaching at, they did this whole like survey, and they found out that grades were like really bad for kids' self-esteem. So they got rid of them. So we just had like letters, and they had like a number value for grades. And kids could realize that they, because like an F was weighted like a 1, they could fail just about everything, pass by one with a D on one grade, and then pass for the semester. It was just anarchy, man.
Yeah, it's like, we could talk about wokeism later on in the show, but it's kind of this like woke behavior, right? That's like, and I'm kind of tolerant of some wokeism, but like I can't give your kid the grade they earned. Well, that type of shit, I'm like, no, like your kid needs to know that if they work hard, good things happen to them, and if they don't work hard, they got shit they got to deal with.
Like well, and there's winners and losers in life too. You know what I mean? And it's you sometimes lose by the hopes that you don't do it again and you learn something from it. Like, and I think if we take that away from people, that's dangerous, man, because if you don't learn from failure, you're always going to fail then.
Yeah, there has to be, and look, there's no perfect system. I'm sure that
no, absolutely not.
There's ways to grade in a more like probably a better way than when we were in school, right? But so these little kids are trying to piss you off. Yes. You're back to I like to go down a lot of rabbit holes, when I hear shit on the show. So these kids are like trying to piss you off to put you on social, which is fucking insanity to me.
Yes.
Like, I would
every single day I would get home and I'd be like, oh.
Could you break their phones? Would you get fired for that?
Well, they weren't even supposed to have phones, but they were really good at like quickly getting rid of them, hiding them, putting them in other places. Like it was like, oh wow. It was intense, man. And the thing was too, is this was a really good athletic school. So like I couldn't even punish them either, because if they were an athlete, they were just going to play. Like I had this girl that was like 6'7". I've never seen a taller woman in my entire life. They were supposed to do a paper for like a large part of their grade, and she didn't do anything. So like I actually had to write a paper and put her name on it to fail her. So she gets up in front of the whole class, and I'm 5'7", man, so I'm a freaking midget. So she crumples this paper up, flicks it in my face, and goes, "Fuck you, man," right in front of the whole school, and or in the whole class. Nothing happened. I sent her the principal. They sent her back. So I'm just like, what am I supposed to do?
Yeah, I'd be like, yeah, I guess you probably did the right thing. You became an entrepreneur.
Yes.
You're like, yeah, fuck this. But this really does speak to this huge issue, around leading indicators for the demise of an empire, which is how are people being educated, right?
Yes.
And like, dude, when I was in high school, I don't give a shit if you're if you're like, I used to get special treatment because I was an athlete and I was a student leader. I mean, dude, I got the specialist treatment you could get. Like, I wouldn't go to class for the whole semester. I get a B, right? And I would never in my wildest dreams think to disrespect a teacher, because there was a repercussion of expulsion that would happen. I'm telling you, I was one of the best wrestlers in the state of California, and they would expel me. Well, I know they would. They didn't care. It's public school, right? So yeah, I think that there's this and look, there's probably examples all throughout time of athletes getting special treatment. So I don't think that that's necessarily confined to 10 years ago. But yeah, I think that we live in a world right now. I have a friend who's a professor in New York City, and she's like, I can't give these kids bad grades. Like, I'm not allowed to. like if I flunk them, like, I have to go deal with my administration. So I'm like, fuck it. I'll just give them I'll give them a C, not have to deal.
But you know what the wild part about that is, man, is then they get out of school with a liberal arts degree, which doesn't really qualify anybody to do anything. Like even me having a history degree, there's not much I can do with that. And I think that the problem is we're churning out a lot of kids that don't have abilities. Like, frankly, the biggest thing missing in society now is trade schools and people that do apprenticeships for a period of time. Because, dude, I know some plumbers that make bank right out of trade school because there's a demand for it, and you could do a business doing it.
Oh yeah, dude, you want to crush it? Go cut concrete or lay HVAC. Seriously, like the trade schools are highly neglected, and now there's such a shortage of this trade school talent that you can't build it fast enough. So here's the real kicker. I mean, and if you're an Andrew Yang lover, which I'm not necessarily, but there's certain aspects of what he says that hold true, dude. They're like, technology is just building literally like AI to fix these problems. So like, you're not going to need humans, right?
He's an interesting guy too. He's on the list of people I actually really, really want to interview. I listened to an interview he did with Glenn Beck not long ago, and I am not a big believer in universal basic income because I think it's going to kind of be a race to the bottom there. But here's the thing: the spin he has on it that I did not realize is all these tech companies are using our data all the time. So he looks at it as a licensing fee. Like, basically, tech companies would be paying you like a monthly, for using all of your data, or you could decide not to use your data. He's an interesting guy, and I don't agree with him on a lot of things, but he's a very smart guy.
Yeah. I'm kind of, I probably lean more left than you do, but I still am like, this does not seem like a great solution. Like, giving people money and them living a life without purpose seems like that doesn't solve a problem. Like, that's how, like, you got a ton of people who have their basic needs covered that have no purpose in their life. That's scary to me.
Yeah.
That's like, I don't even know what the social ramifications of that are. That's like that doesn't solve the problem. That solves the problem of them being able to feed themselves, though that does not solve the problem of what do you do with all those people. And that's where it's like, someone has utopic ideas around, well, can this become the greatest period of creation ever? Maybe, but not if these kids have zero critical thinking skills or education. I'm fearful for some of that stuff. I'd love to kind of make a hard left, though, going back to your story.
Yeah.
Hard left back to you.
Yeah, the thing that stinks, man, is you like rabbit holes and so do I. So I'll chase you whatever rabbit hole you go in.
Well, I know we can talk about so much stuff because we have pretty strong opinions about a lot of the stuff that's happening in our world. But what so how did you jump from being a 5'7" teacher dealing with a 6'7" student who's a pain in your ass to becoming an entrepreneur?
Well, I did that for 2 years, and it was actually a really difficult situation. It happened. My mom had a stroke in 2012, and she's luckily still with us, but she's very, very disabled at this point in time. So it kind of changed my viewpoint on life. My dad needed a lot more help since I'm an only child. So it was a big life shift, and it made me look at a lot of what I'm doing. And here's the weird thing I realized, and I don't know if you ever had this happen to you in your life, Darius. I looked at it and I'm like, is this my dream or is this someone else's? Like what I'm actually doing right now. And I looked at it and I'm like, I don't think this is my dream. I don't think this is what I want to do. And my wife was presented with a network marketing opportunity. I didn't know what that was. So I thought I was going to be like a gazillionaire rolling in G5s in like a week.
Oh.
And all I did was make a lot of people hate me. And I actually called the principal and I'm like, I've got a new business. I quit. So I had no income and I quit to go full-time in network marketing.
Whoa.
Insanity, man.
Wow. What was the network marketing product that you guys
Market
did?
America. We sell everything.
Is that like the Amway of today? Is that?
Well, they not even just Amway, like websites, health, like they work with doctors, everything. So it was like difficult because like every person you meet, you're looking for something wrong with their life and be like, I have everything.
Yeah.
You could have some.
Yeah. What's your differentiating value prop? I'm the Amazon of network marketing and then some.
Yes.
Yeah. Wow. Okay. So how long did it take before you guys bought your G5?
Never bought a G5. Now here's the crazy part though. I think it was one of the best like learning experiences I had, and like how to start a business with no skills whatsoever. Cause dude, I was a bookworm. Like I didn't know how to do anything. So I made some decent money and I actually, paid my bills for 2 years doing it.
Because you were a good salesperson, maybe?
I wasn't at first. I learned how to be. That was the biggest thing, is I learned how to sell and I learned how to present from not knowing anything, because I was like, well, shit, we're here. Now I got to figure out what to do with this, because I just burned the bridge. Nobody else is going to hire me after the way I just quit. So, so I had to figure out what to do. I did that for 2 years, and eventually I just didn't like the person I was like doing that, because you get weird, man. You really do, like trying to find new people, because that's kind of the thing. So I did that for 2 years, and then I actually went into selling life insurance, which I was really good at, but I hated those uncomfortable conversations about death every single day. I got depressed pretty quickly from it.
Oh, wow.
And kind of the final straw was, I was like, all right, well, I can sell products on Amazon. So we went to China. We learned how you like source products, do all this kind of stuff. We had some meetings, and we started buying products from China and selling them on Amazon. But one of the things you do when you first start is you sell your product for $1. But if you're me, you forget to uncheck the box that says, put my promo code on my listing, which means I lost all of my products for like $250 in about 10 minutes. So I was out of business.
Wait. I'm not well versed in this, but
yeah.
basically you.
So by default, it checks the box when you make a promo code, and it puts it on your listing by default that says, oh, you can get this product for $1. So some really smart person is like, look at this idiot. I can get everything they have for $1.
Whoa. So you can't like undo it and say, sorry, this was a mistake and I'm not selling it to you?
Not once it's done, because it's Amazon. You're just a third-party vendor. So you have to be smart enough to not be stupid in the first place.
Oh, no way, man. But like they're kind of screwing. Why do they auto check that? That kind of screws their sellers.
I don't know, to be honest. I think they expect most people to not be selling it for $1 to get a bunch of things sold for a really cheap rate, because they don't want you doing it that way anyway. So I think that's kind of the issue. So I was out of business there very, very quickly. So I learned how to build websites from watching YouTube videos and things like that. So I actually was working at a friend's marketing firm, making pretty decent money, and started this podcast, the Create Your Own Life Show, just as a hobby back in 2016 or 2015. Sorry. And it took off, man. We saw 10,000 listens in our first month. We had a lot of people start asking us for help. So we started an agency to help people, get on podcasts as guests. And it's been pretty cool since. We've got a team of 18 now, and we've put people on thousands of podcasts, and it's pretty cool to be a part of the new world of media.
So let's talk about this, because I've now had my podcast it'll be a year last month.
Mm-hmm.
And I think my first month I had like 4,000 or 5,000 downloads, and then it like dropped off like dramatically. It went from like, because I pushed it. I was top 100 in business on iTunes, and I was top 10 in entrepreneurship. So I had a great launch, right? And Jay's good at podcast launch. Mm-hmm. Jay Wong, if you're listening, like I'm promoting you right now. And so he does a good job on that, right? But it's a big effort, right?
Yes.
And so then it drops off and drops down to like I think like 2,000 downloads a month, right? And then I doubled up my shows and got it up to like 4,000 or 5,000 downloads a month, right? I think I got it back up to like 3,000 or 4,000. And now that I'm doing media buying, it's a lot more.
Mhm.
But like I look at this game of building a podcast or building and I interviewed Jordan Harbinger a while ago, and I said, "How do you build your show?" And he's like, "You got to spend money." And I think and I asked John Lee Dumas the same question. I said, "Hey, if you were to start, the Entrepreneurs on Fire podcast now, like, and you wanted to turn it into what it is today, like," he's like, "I wouldn't be able to."
Mhm.
Right? He's
That's
like,
exactly been my experience.
so yeah, so that's where someone like myself who started their podcast in 2021, who's trying to build a show right now, like what are your thoughts on that? I mean, if you had good success and it's worked for you, and these guys had good success and it worked for them, but like what are your thoughts on this? Because I look at this and I'm like, this is kind of like a black box. Like, you got to either spend money to like get people to listen to get in front of people, advertising the show, putting it on third party platforms. um Hala Taha, who's a friend of ours, she does a lot of I work with her agency and she does good work. And like, they all have kind of the same perspective, which is if you want to build a show, you got to spend money to promote it until you can
Mhm.
build enough subscribers to support it with advertising. But what are your thoughts
Correct.
on this?
So when I started in 2015, there were 240,000 podcasts out there, and there's like 3.5 million now. So like, it's grown so substantially. It is substantially harder to get found not being anybody. And when I started, like I said, we had 10,000 listens in our first month. I reached out to every single person on my phone via text message. I had built a small email list with, I think, 500 or 600 people on it. So I reached out to all those people, sent 3,000 individual LinkedIn messages, 500 Facebook messages. So I did whatever I could because I knew the number one thing I had to do was win the subscribe. And by doing that, we were able to actually hit the new and noteworthy there in Apple Podcasts, which at that point was iTunes. And when it's different now, but at that time, when you hit new and noteworthy, you stuck there for 8 weeks of free promotion.
Oh,
So we really scored early on, and it was a big driver to those 10,000 listens in the first month. Of I was nobody, man. I had no social media, I had nothing. So at that point in time, that's how I was able to stick it. Now, the thing that's different now is there's so many people to stand out from, and there's so many podcasts out there. The difference is, as you mentioned, you've got to have a paid strategy. We've been doing a lot with YouTube recently to try and start growing more over there, and we've been spending quite a bit of money on YouTube. But also going on other shows as a guest is a really, really, really important way to do it as well, in addition to media buying, because you need to reach out to people that already listen to podcasts. I think that's one of the ways people really go wrong, is they try and promote their podcasts to people that don't listen to them, in an ad strategy or whatever it is. Like, it makes sense to buy spots on other podcasts where people hear about you, or go on other podcasts as a guest. But to me, yeah, you're kind of at a point where you got to spend some money to get out there, man. The space has changed a lot, and you got to kind of rise above the noise. And the only way to do that costs money right now.
yeah. And that's where I'm kind of I started thinking about it, and this goes for anyone that has a podcast. It's like, yeah, to your point, go where podcast listeners are. So you can advertise on other people's podcasts. So advertising your show that way. Do you have any thoughts around, like, what are your thoughts on TikTok? Because I know that that seems like, I mean, there's only really two platforms you can get organic lift right now. LinkedIn's one of them, and TikTok's the other, that are true platforms, that are big platforms. What are your thoughts on maybe trying to leverage either of those platforms?
I don't have TikTok. I don't know. I Okay, you're gonna think I'm crazy. I'm afraid of the Chinese Communist Party, and I don't want them in my phone. That's why I'm not on TikTok.
Yeah, no. Listen, man, I'm on. I don't think you're crazy. I'm on a Signal group with like a ton of like pretty well known people,
Hmm.
and they're all like, they're all afraid. Wait, I can't even get. I don't even want to say what the stuff I get to read, but
No, no, I get it. I get it.
I get a lot of like propaganda stuff that's like, I don't even know what to call it, because I was gonna say it's like, it seems like there's a thread of conservative behavior around it,
Hmm.
but it's around like food shortage and like privacy rights, and there's a mindset that is very fearful of all those things. One of which, to your point, is like, I have a buddy that won't take pictures, who's a awesome person, he will not take a picture of a QR code.
What?
Yeah, because he's like, they get full access to your phone. Like if like
A QR code does?
Yeah, I guess so. That's what he told me. Because
I had no idea. I just know, like, if you read the terms of service of TikTok, like they get access to all files in your phone is what you're granting them access to. Like, you just got to read the TOS, man.
Yeah, yeah, and I'm on TikTok, but I'm not using it. So yeah, hey TikTok, if you're listening, like there ain't shit on my phone that's interesting. So like I guess but I see your point. It's like, hey, this is the Chinese government essentially controls their has ultimate control. At the end of the day, they have ultimate control because of the way their government's set up of their companies, right?
So I actually win a lot personally on Twitter, believe it or not, which is the one that people say, oh, Twitter's a cesspool. I don't like, for a lot of the content I'm talking about and discussing with people, like I get a lot of reach on Twitter, man. And like, I actually get a lot of my guests that way as well, because like I'm verified on Twitter. So you get a second timeline and stuff like that, where you can only see other verified people. So it's actually a really, really great contact tool too. So we actually get a ton of reach on Twitter.
So on Twitter, by the way, did you see the thing this morning with Elon Musk, like buying 9%?
I'm very interested to see what happens with it. He bought 9.2%.
Yeah, he spent like $2.89 billion. I was like, and I was like, does that give him rights from can he go in there and like, I'm wondering how that works from like a voting rights perspective to like influence board behavior. Can he actually kind of do what like Icon does, Carl Icahn does, and become like what's it called when you're going out against the board? You know what I'm talking about?
No, I know Carl. I don't know the word for it, but I know Carl Icahn, and there's another guy. What is the guy that went after that network marketing company, Herbalife? There's another guy that does that type of thing.
Yeah. I know what you're talking about, but it's a thing where you like advocate on behalf of the shareholders.
Yes.
And if you own enough of the company, you can essentially like replace the CEO if you want, right? Like if you get enough, there's a name for it though. It's activist. Oh, if you're like an activist shareholder, that's what it's called.
Yeah. Yeah, I don't know exactly how it works, because the articles I was reading this morning is like, well, it kind of just happened, so we don't know a ton about it. Right now, it seems to be a passive role. I don't know how he gets an active role. I just don't understand enough about that world. But I think it'd be interesting to understand, what he's going to do with it.
Yeah, a part of me, and I'm not 100% in the camp of I get it, right? It's like, hey, look, this is public domain because of how many people use the platform. So, like, is there an inherent risk of not allowing unadulterated free speech? Theoretically, yes, there is. And then the flip side of it is we have these kids in your classroom from 10 years ago that can barely read. That if I put a tweet out, they believe it without actually going and doing research, right? So we have this like lack of critical thinking to counterbalance the fact that free speech now can be put out in a way that it was even when our forefathers wrote it. Like if I said, hey, George Washington and James Madison or whomever, hey, there's gonna be these platforms where a bunch of idiots get a look at it, and whatever you say they believe, and it's gonna and like how would they have written those laws that way, right? Fundamentally, I agree with it that hey, like picking and choosing what people read, it has like who's to say who's right?
It's such a hard thing to do too, because like there should not be like child porn out there and things like that. Like that's dangerous, but like some people see it as free speech. That's not free speech in my opinion. That's sick. But then you also have, I don't know, like to me, fact checking has been like the scariest thing, because if you read like some of these things on like Snopes, it'll say partially false, and they'll like point to something that had nothing to do with the point and say, oh, because of that it makes the thing partially false. So it's just, we're in a really weird era of the world. I don't know how to describe it.
It's funny though, going back to like your experience in college of studying propaganda during the Roman times, like none of this is new.
No, it's not.
Like having friction in society. There's a book, Ray Dalio's new book, right, Changing World Order, is like we're in like the fifth. If you look historically, like this thing where you have internal conflict is not new. This happens every 150 years. Last time it happened, I mean, you can go back to Germany. This was happening in the right after World War I, right? That, and like, how does a Adolf Hitler come to power? When a majority of the people in Germany didn't agree with his, ideological beliefs, and then full leverage of propaganda to divide and then like control the populace, right? So it's interesting that I don't think this idea of leveraging fake news is new. Like the
No.
way we're doing it is different because of technology, but the idea of how we do it's that's always been out there.
And that's the interesting thing too. So like my masters, I explored how, because Augustus Caesar was the first Roman emperor to convince people he was God. So I kind of looked at how he did it. And Alexander the Great was the model he used because number one, Alexander died young, which is important to making people think you're God. Number two, when he took over Egypt, he walked into the temple of Zeus Ammon, and when he conquered Egypt, he was the Pharaoh of Egypt. So Pharaoh of Egypt, you're called son of God. So he walks in, the oracle says, "Greetings, son of God." He goes, "I'm the son of God." So then he like kind of like lived his life like he was this divine being, and other people started believing it because the Egyptians kind of, that viewpoint helped a lot with that. And Augustus then looked at that and he goes, "Okay, so I got to create a lot of propaganda around that." And he figured out how to do it, and people then worshiped the Roman emperor for like 500 years after that.
Who is there was a Roman emperor that was like the man of the people that like gave up his title, moved out to the country, and then they asked him to come back. Do you know what I'm
No,
talking about?
so he wasn't an emperor. So there's like a divide in the Rome time period. There's the Roman Republic, and then there's the Roman Empire. The empire starts with Augustus. Augustus is the first part of the Roman Empire. Before that, it was a republic where people voted and everything. There were
Right.
senators and consuls and
That's
things
right.
like that.
There was no emperor. That's right.
Correct. And then historically, they were a monarchy. So before that, they were the kingdom of Rome. But there was this guy Cincinnatus, who the city of Cincinnati
That's
is
who it is. Yeah,
the city of Cincinnati is based off of him. And the Romans had realized that the only way you like really solve a problem is by giving somebody like dictatorial power for a short period of time.
Right.
So you'd have all the power for 6 months, and then after 6 months, you lose your power. He was the only dictator ever to lay down his power. All the other ones that declared themselves dictator were like, "You know, I'm dictator. Well, it's for life now." He was the only one to actually like do it, solve a problem, and then go back to farming.
Didn't his kids like take? Didn't one of his kids become an emperor? Isn't that this part of that story?
No, because Cincinnatus was like hundreds of years before there was an emperor.
Got it. Okay. So there's these books that I'm reading with my kids for homeschooling that are all about like the history of the world. And so, which are amazing. They're like the best books, and you could read them. They're built for homeschooling.
Oh,
And
cool.
a friend of mine referred me to it. I'll get them and I'll put them in the show notes. But there's like 5 of them, and they're like 500 pages each. And they start like literally in the beginning of like nomadic times, right? Like way before the Roman Empire. And then I think right now we're in like the Dark Ages. Like we're in book 2, and we just got to like the Dark Ages. But it's we're actually to right when like I was just reading it to my son the other night, and we're learning about the founding of Muslimism or Islam.
Mm-hmm.
Right. So, but it goes through all these things. Now they cherry pick. I got pissed because I'm Persian, right? So my family is from, my name is Darius after Darius the Great, right? Who ruled the Persian Empire. So they're talking about the Persian Empire. They totally skip Darius the Great. They go from Cyrus and Xerxes, and they don't talk about Darius the Great at all. And I was like, how do you talk about the Persian Empire and not talk about Darius the Great?
Did they at least talk about Darius the Third or no?
I think they talk about him losing. Like they talk about who was it? The Spartans or like
no, it was Alexander beat Darius.
Alexander the Great kicked his ass. They talk about that, right? But I'm like, well, what about the 300 years before this? Like, why are we talking about the loss of my namesake, right? But I do like, and there's so much information. It's really a cool thing. I'll get the name of the book, but it's a cool thing to read to kids. And I have an 8-year-old, and we've been reading them for like 2 years. We just work through them. The cool thing about these books is as you read them, every 4 years, your kids can read them again, and they get something out of them different. But yeah, the Cincinnatus was I was like, I like that guy. That guy, I relate to that guy, like the servant leader type of guy, So,
and, well, because he's supposed to be the example of like absolute power not corrupting. Like he did it, handled his problem, put the power down, then kind of went back to work. But it's never happened before. Sulla in I think 54 declares himself dictator for life, conquers Rome, dictator for life. Julius Caesar, dictator for life. Every Roman emperor, dictator for life. Like they don't lay it down. So he's just supposed to be the guy that's like didn't do it.
Right. So to your point, power corrupts. And I love, to kind of again make a hard right turn this time. Like, so you have your podcast, and
Yeah.
you've had some pretty powerful and interesting people on the show. Do you mind kind of naming like your who's who list of guests on your show?
Yeah, I've had former CIA director David Petraeus on. I've had four-time Indy 500 champion Elio Castroneves. Trying to think of who else would be like recognizable. I've had former New York Yankee Nick Swisher, Johnny Damon. Had a lot of cool people, man. We're almost on 1,000 episodes, and it's been a very, very cool experience.
So you've talked to some powerful people, and again, we started the show. We've been kind of like talking about, lightly about our from our own political worldviews, right? It's lightly. We haven't gone deep on that, but
Yeah.
like you're interviewing these powerful people. This idea that we're in a world that power corrupts. What are some things? What are some big things you've learned? And this is I'm segueing this because I want to talk about your book in a second. But what are some big things you've learned from interviewing these like people that are like, in some cases world beaters, right? That they've done these amazing things that like you should not be able to do. I'm reading Black Swan right now, right, by Nassim Taleb, and it's like a guy winning the Indy 500 is a Black Swan event.
Mhm.
Like the odds of
Winning
that
it 4 times though too.
yeah, winning it 4 times, even more of a Black Swan event, right? Like
Mhm.
becoming a CIA director, that is a Black Swan event. Like the odds of a human being rising to that who has that goal is like almost like basically infinitesimally zero,
Mhm.
right? So yeah, like, but now they get that they've created a trust with the public or in the world that they're in, that they are the best at what they do, and with that comes power, and with that comes responsibility. What are some things you've learned through those experiences?
It's funny. I feel like we've been talking about a lot of it all the way through of it because I don't know if it's that I've learned a lot of these things because I've had the interviews I've had, or I also started with a bias and found something that agreed with it. So I don't know. But what's the thing that's interesting is they don't see life as easy. They're willing to kind of go at the adversity in life. I think so many people shy away from discomfort. They shy away from what doesn't work for them. And, people that I've spoken to, people that are extraordinary, they realize that the difficulty they go through, the adversity they go through, it's almost like a blacksmith's furnace. They're going to come out different than they went in it. And they're not going to shy away from that. They're going to look for what can I get out of the situation? What's my advantage in this situation? What can I learn from it? Like that's a really, really, really big one that I've seen in a lot of them. Another one is, you know, not doing things because of the opinions of others. And, I'm sure we've all dealt with this. I dealt with this when I was younger. As I said, I picked a career because I want to make my parents happy. And, people that are extraordinary are willing to say, this is what you want from me. This is what I want from me. This is what I'm going to do. But at the same time, they don't invalidate that opinion of someone else because I think a lot of times we can choose something we want to do and then we almost make other people wrong in doing it. And because of that, we create a lot of animosity for ourselves. So people that are extraordinary are kind of able to pick what they want to do, respect others' viewpoints, but not create, antagonism on that, which is, a pretty awesome thing to do. Another really big one, frankly, is being somebody that's willing to be a leader because you meet a lot of people in life and they're not willing to lead. They're not willing to go out first. They're not willing to, do a lot of different things to make the world a better place for others. So it really is something that's pretty incredible when you look at it that way.
What do you think, if you were to define leadership from your perspective, how would you define that?
It's more of the perspective of servant leadership, like you've been talking about. Like I'm a big. I read The Art of War every single year because it's one of those books that every time you read it, you get new insight on it. I do the same with Atlas Shrugged because I'm always picking up new things, and you would never ask someone to do something you'd never do yourself, and that's David Petraeus, who was the former CIA director, talks about a major general that he worked under when he first got out of officer's candidate school. And he said the thing that was really interesting about this guy is he wasn't the one that was like, how many olives I get in my drink? He would be the guy that would take care of the bartender, take care of everybody else around him, handle people well. And when you do that, that's real leadership, right? You're making other people feel appreciated and wanted. So I think that's a really big difference is people that are willing to, lead right alongside of others, if that makes sense.
Oh yeah, totally. There's a movie or a TV series out there now about the WeWork called We Crashed. Have you seen this?
I listened to the podcast actually, so I've heard it.
Yeah. So they're talking about his wife Rebecca, and she just sucks, right? Like, and there's a scene where like they get to like they're doing like summer camp or whatever, and it was like a big party, and they invite a bunch of their people from WeWork to this like campground their family owns, and she comes from I think her dad and Gwyneth Paltrow's dad are brothers, right? So they come from this like this high society family out in New York, and the head of communications. I think this might be. I don't know if this actually happened, but this is at least the picture they're painting of her, right? So maybe this is just fiction, but I got to assume if I'm her that it probably did happen because she's probably going to sue them if it didn't happen. The woman who's head of comm for WeWork is driving her to go to the cabin, right in the summer camp, and she gets up. She's like, "Just put my bags in the bedroom," right? Now, dude, if the woman was a bellhop, which she's not, I could potentially see that as an appropriate thing to request of somebody. But I remember watching it and just like rubbed me the wrong way. And I was like, man, fuck that chick, man. Like my favorite saying is fuck that guy. So yeah, fuck that girl. Fuck
But
that
it's interesting though, because I think it's also part of the way you carry yourself. You know what I mean? Like, I open doors for other people, man. Like if I see somebody's got their hands full, I open the door for them. You know, if I see somebody looks like they need help, hey, do you need help? Like, I've pulled over to change tires for people on the side of the road or fix a radiator cap or something like that. But like, those things are leadership, right? Those things are, leading from the way of somebody needs help and may need your expertise or your just free arm in that case. But that's what actual leadership is. It's not like demanding things of other people.
Yeah, it's funny. Like you just remind me of something. So when I was in college, I worked the door of a nightclub, right?
Mhm.
And I used to, have to open. We had like velvet ropes, and I'd have to open the velvet ropes and let people in and let them out. And I got really good at it. I could do like spin moves and do it right.
Every time you pick the ropes up, it's like bow, 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 bow. Anyway.
I could do like 360s where I grab it and spin, but I look cool when I did it. But what was funny is what you just said is I actually realized how much I enjoy holding. I always hold the door open for people.
Absolutely.
Like out of my own way, I'll do it. Right. To your point, because I'm like, it is a show of like, I see you and I appreciate that, like this is a active servant that I don't need to do, that I'm choosing to do because that's how I want to show up in the world. Right.
You know what's weird about that though? And like, I know, like if I do that for somebody in my generation, a large percentage of people wouldn't like you doing that, which is really weird. I don't know if you've seen that. Like, oh, I can get the door myself. It's like, well, I'm here to help. There's been the kind of this also weird viewpoint shift around it too.
Is that divided by gender or just by generational?
Just generational, because I've seen it with men and women. I've seen it either way. I think it's generational.
I'm old school. I'd be like, hey, bud, just take it and shut up. It's like I'm super old school. My dad was born in 1939 in Iran, which means is the same as like someone's parent being born in like 1889 in the United States. So like I'm as old school as they come. I mean,
well, my grandfather was in the Navy, so I was raised like yes sir, no sir, yes sir, yes ma'am, no ma'am. Like that's just how you treat people,
Yeah, look, I think there's a balance of all this stuff. So if you're talking about worldviews, right? There's a thing called spiral dynamics. Are you familiar with this?
I'm not, no.
There's Ken Blanchard, I think, wrote a book about it. It's called Spiral Dynamics, which essentially it breaks down all the different worldviews, and there's a hierarchy of worldview, and they're built specifically for essentially the ascension of man, right? So and it goes from like there's different colors. So if you go back to like prehistoric times, there was a worldview around survival that's very different than now, and you had to behave a certain way to protect to live, right? Well, those things are less important now. And if you go back to maybe 100 years ago or even 200 years ago, there was an autocratic worldview that served man very well because we needed strong leaders who told us what to do, and that was the end of it, right? And that elevated to they called a authoritarian worldview, which is traditional, more of a traditional values, right? So that are the forefathers of our country, the populace was very traditional values, but the mindset of the leadership is usually one level above. ahead, not above necessarily, but ahead. And so our forefathers were strategic worldview, which was smartest person in the room wins, right? And if you look at the founding of our country, it was kind of built with that ideology in mind, right? And now we've come into, and Silicon Valley is built with that type of mindset. The next level up, they call it, which a lot of people are having issues with right now, is this worldview around, like, it's popular. I'm forgetting the name of it right now, but it's like essentially a populist worldview, right? Which is this green worldview, and in that worldview, it is where, hey, we should all do what's best to help everybody, and what every 50 to 100 years you need to elevate. The next above that's integral, which is yellow, and so green, they're saying that we have too much of it now, which there's a toxic green and there's a positive green. Toxic green is where we're starting to see people have issues around socialism, and this thing where it's like, to your point earlier around, we have like this Andrew Yang thing. I want to give universal basic income to people, right? There's a negative to there's actually a negative potentially to that, if we're not careful, right? And so the highest level of this is integral, which says they're all right and they're all appropriate in different situations. And how do you balance those things? And the issue that my mentor Rand Stagen, who was a guest on the show, says is like, listen, we have world 3 leaders and world 5 problems, right? And we need level 3 leaders and level 5 problems. And so it's like, how are we need to level up as leaders, and it needs to be around not people getting offended because you're holding the door. It's like understanding why you did it, right? Having taken that moment of empathy to say, oh, well, Jeremy isn't doing it to like one up me, or I don't know why you would get offended by that. Me personally, maybe because my worldview is different, but it's to appreciate why you did it. And even if I didn't want you to do it, it's just to have that empathy as to why you chose to do it. You know what I mean?
No, I do. And I think that's one of the things that's really weird now, because you look at people that we look at as leaders, like they're leaders for being popular, really. Like they're not leaders because they've done something impressive, if that makes sense. A lot of people are leaders.
Like the Kardashians?
Yeah. But I had a conversation with somebody about this recently, right? See, here's the weird thing, right? I'm going to go back to the Romans and Greeks again, because I have to. Like if you look at them, they had this weird worldview that there wasn't a real separation between human and the divine. And humans walked around and the divinity walked around, and there was kind of, somebody could be a god. It could be possible. But you look at like the worldview we have now, and we kind of see that, and we're like, oh, that's not true, because, we're advanced in the world. We don't see that. But we've actually started to create something like that again with celebrity.
Oh,
you know what I mean? Like where like they're like, oh, you're kind of you, but you're not on the level of the Kardashians. But the Kardashians like probably aren't that smart and probably shouldn't have the leadership position they have. So we have this kind of weird thing where people are leaders because they're popular. People get elected into office because they're popular, not because of what they might do. Like the people I would vote for would never get voted into anything. But, like that's we're in this really, really weird position. And it goes back to what you're saying. The people we're putting in positions of power or leadership, or it doesn't have to be government, can't solve the problems we have because they're there because they're popular.
What's funny is I actually think entrepreneurism answers a lot of these problems.
It does.
Because the markets don't give a fuck about how popular you are. Now, there's definitely an argument there to be made of like people that are really good at social media could build a good business and they understand the game of popularity better than I do, right? But like in general, that I think that's a really small percentage of the population that can exploit that. And I think business in general, the markets are efficient and they will rake your face across the coals if you don't provide value and do it in a smart and thoughtful way that is profitable, right? So but my answer to all this is I think entrepreneurism is the answer to all of it. I think that's how I think entrepreneurs how we circumvent some of these problems, because the markets don't care and they will force the best to show up. What do you think about that?
I'm going to go down another rabbit hole. I don't know if you want to go down.
Let's do it.
Because I think the thing that is dangerous right now, do you know what ESG is?
ESG is what?
Environmental, social, and governance scores.
Yeah.
So companies are getting like rated on like how woke they are. So you're seeing like companies saying, I can solve this problem. And then with ESG scores, they're saying, well, you're not woke enough. Don't solve problems. So it's also at the same time, we're having issues in other areas. And I think that's another thing we got to worry about.
So I was having a discussion with my sister about wokeness, because her husband, my brother-in-law, works at like a huge construction company. It's like commercial construction. They do like massive hospitals.
Hmm.
There, and we were talking about how because of was it DEI or whatever, right? Diversity and inclusion,
Yes.
which let's forget about anyone's opinion about it. But what she was saying essentially was that there's these women who are being promoted to construction managers who are, let's say, African American, right? And they're having like literally like, hey, we have to hire. This when I was going to college, the affirmative action became really popular.
Yeah.
And then they kind of did away with it, probably because there was, like anything, the pendulum swung too far. They realized there was some miscalculations of what happens when you just make decisions based off of, like, let's call it just ethnicity and not based off of like ability, like
Hmm.
completely, right? Not to say they're separate from one another, but if I just have that one like filter and I don't look at the other parts, then there's a reason why they undid it, right?
Right.
um and so I said, well, like, I can, and so she's saying that's causing a lot of friction with, because this is a white male dominated industry, right?
Hmm.
Like commercial construction, right? So
Right.
that is for sure dominated by men, and without question, at the upper echelons, it's white men, right? So her answer was, hey, look, yeah, it's not fair, but in order for there to be equity here, there needs to be an overcorrection, or else we're not going to get to the middle where it's supposed to be. So and I found it to be an interesting perspective. I don't necessarily agree with it, but
I don't know if I agree with that either, because like it's like Martin Luther King saying judge not by the color of skin but by the content of their character. And here's the problem, man. Like, I don't have a better solution of how we get there, because
yeah,
you can look at things and say, like, there's some things very wrong with how the world functions, but I don't know if that's the way we fix it either.
yeah, I don't have an answer for you. I thought
Because
it
you're
was
trying to change people's biases and how we do things, and people have biases, and I don't know how you change that.
Well, yeah. So her argument's like, hey, listen, well, if we just keep doing it the way we've been doing it, where it's like you're inching it, we're inching it in on this unlevel playing field, then that's not going to fix it either.
Hmm.
Is the solution that you overcompensate for it? Look, like, if you were to like write it out, probably it's somewhere in the middle, right? I'm as hardcore of a moderate as you can be. And I said, you
Yeah.
always know you're a moderate if your liberal friends think you voted for Trump, and if your right wing friends think you're a Democrat, right? So which I fall square in that camp.
Yeah.
Right. But I have a client that's like, well, Darius, you're lefty. And I'm like, I'm not lefty at all, man. I go down middle of the fairway. There is some shit that I'll say that you're not going to believe me, because it actually goes against what you think of me. But yeah, I think the answer to all this is empathy, and really trying to solve for an outcome and get the fucking gamesmanship out of the system. And that's where I think that right now, that this corrupting power is like even if we
Yep.
look at what's happening, politically in our country, it's like, dude, the far left and the far right own the mic, but 85.
That's the problem, man. Like, if you ask most Americans, they're neither, but they have to pick a side because there's only two sides to pick.
Well, yeah. And so then you think about it and you're like, all right, well, here's the issue is that I always say this in business. I coach CEOs all over the country and I tell them, look, incentivize the behavior you want,
Hmm.
right? So we have a primary system that incentivizes, non-moderate positions, because if I want to win the primaries, I have to have a more, polarizing point of view.
Hmm.
And so it actually incentivizes polarizing like politics, right? When the reality is most people don't agree with that. They agree,
Yeah.
they're somewhere in the middle, lean left, lean right, but they're not these fringe, they're not Occupy Wall Street, and they're not, Antifa,
Yeah.
they're
Like,
not.
like myself, I tend to think I'm pretty conservative, but I can't listen to conservative talk radio because I'm like, dude, you're crazy. Like, what the hell? Like, they're too far right for me. So it's like it can be difficult, like, to see, like, well, what do I identify on? And there's two things on this I'm thinking, Darius. Like, have you heard of the concept of an Overton window?
Yeah, I've heard of it. Remind me what it is.
So you give two extremes so that people pick something in the middle, because it's shown by itself, it's still pretty extreme, but shown against the two extremes, it's not as extreme. And it's kind of the concept we keep living with, because we're continually forced to pick a side, and we're like, oh, we try to fall somewhere in the middle, but it's still extreme as it would have been. Does that make sense? I know it's kind of a
Slightly. So let's use like real world examples.
yeah. So like one side says death penalty's good, the other side says death penalty's bad. So then you pick something that says, well, we only kill people if they're below age, blah, blah, blah. Well, because it's not totally death penalty all the time. So we still pick something that's kind of like, ooh, I don't know if I would do that if shown on its own, but it's the Overton window makes you kind of inch towards something you might not pick otherwise.
So both people were pissed, basically?
Yeah, both people are pissed, so they kind of pick something else that they don't quite agree with, but it's not the other thing, so it's okay.
And are we saying that is a better solution, or that's what we're living right now?
That's what we're living right now, because we're forced to pick something that, if shown by itself, wouldn't be a solution we would pick. But we're given two bad choices, and we're forced to pick something that isn't a great choice.
But I think we can all agree that Ted Cruz sucks.
I don't disagree. He's the guy's like fake as fake goes. You know what I mean?
I like picking on Ted Cruz. Listen, regardless of what side of the fence you're on, Ted Cruz still sucks.
But there's one more thing I want to say to that too, because George Washington, he told us not to pick political parties because he said it would damage the country. He said, we shouldn't have political parties. We should just be people running for office, and it should be more like, he wanted political office to be like jury duty. And if it was more like jury duty, I think we'd have less problems. But anyway, that's what I got.
Yeah, I think I think ranked choice voting would help solve this problem, right? Because I don't know how you feel about that, but because it eliminates the issue in the primaries, right? If you have ranked choice, like, hey, I didn't get who I wanted, but the number 2 guy or girl they now still have a chance, right? And I think that you got to pull out the corporations being able to pay off politicians, man. This is fucking crazy.
If you get rid of lobbying, you'd fix a lot of things.
Yeah. It's like I came from an industry that was highly lobbied, and it actually, I saw the positives of it, because in more complicated industries, like I came from mortgage lending, where it's complicated. Like government's complicated it, and now they'll go and try to make changes. And you're like, whoa, dude, if you do that, you're going to blow up the entire housing market, like in a really bad way. It's going to screw like every American. And the senators don't know, they know jack shit about how mortgage industry works. Right?
They're just good at winning elections, so they're there.
Yeah, right. Which so I do think that there's some value, because you do need to, but that's been corrupted too, right? So I don't have a perfect answer, but I do think that, like, we need to incentivize the outcomes we want, right? So I do think that people being able to, like, there's no reason that our entire, Senate needs to, the average age of the Senate is what, like 71 years old or something like that.
Yeah.
That's insanity, Like,
well, the Senate doesn't even serve a purpose anymore, though, either, because like constitutionally, the senators used to be appointed by the state legislatures, and the senators would promote the state legislatures, and the House of Representatives would promote the regular people. Right. Now it's just like, everybody's regular people. Like we've constitutionally become a democracy.
Yeah, it's and they're not there trying to get stuff done. They're there to try to hold down the party lines, right?
Yeah,
and it's like, well, no, like that, like literally, like that's not. Like, when's the last time? My belief is there should be a certain amount of legislation that has to be bipartisan, or else they lose their jobs.
Yeah.
Right? Like, again, let's incentivize the behavior one. Hey, 75% of your what you vote on needs to be bipartisan and agreed upon, or else literally you all lose your jobs next term. Like, if you do something like that, it's going to force their hand to go and actually get something done. I had a guy on my show as a friend of mine. He said one of the big issues, and I pick extreme answers, but that probably would solve it. If you said, hey, there's term limits, and if you don't have, if you vote only on party lines every time, like, you're out. This will force them, and if they all know they're out, because again, power corrupts, they want power, they're gonna, like, oh man, how do I go work with that person? Because we're all gonna lose our jobs if we don't work together, right?
Well, the only thing that George Washington recommended for the Bill of Rights was an amendment that didn't make it, and it would have capped congressional representation at one person for every 30,000 people, and what would mean is we'd have about 7,000 senators right now, which would be a really good thing, because tell you right now, 7,000 people can agree on a lot less than 495. But right now they're representing one for every 700,000. So it's a funky situation.
That would be a really big room.
They'd be on Zoom, man.
Yeah.
Who's got the mic open?
They'd have like the Tony Robbins like 360 video behind them, Well, man, dude, we ran over. I figured we'd be. It's fun going down rabbit holes with you.
Man,
we have a lot of fun.
I said the problem is you get in a rabbit hole and I chase you, and that's the problem.
Yeah, that's all right. But I think the listeners have a much better viewpoint of like how you think of things, which really takes us to your book. So let's spend a couple minutes on your book. The book's coming out June 21st. Really, it's all about the learnings from all these amazing people you've interviewed. Anything else a reader, like who's the reader for? Who's the ideal audience for this, and where can they find the book?
Well, I think that the concept behind it is we're all essentially born unremarkable, and it's the things that we do that make us extraordinary. There's people that are born with more, there's people that are born with less, but that doesn't make them extraordinary, because I've met some people that were born into money that lost it very quickly and weren't very nice people. We're all essentially unremarkable. It's the things we do that are extraordinary. And the concepts that I've learned from, almost 1,000 interviews, these are things every single person can apply to find what their extraordinary is, because it's different for everybody. And you are the person that defines that for yourself. So if they head over to getextraordinarybook.com, and you can actually pre-order it now. And if you come back with your receipt or your order number, we're actually going to give you a free version of the audiobook, and also our guide, 30 Days to Extraordinary. So that's over at getextraordinarybook.com.
Awesome, man. And you don't know this, but I always like to support book launches, so I'm going to buy 10 copies of your book.
Damn, thanks, man.
So that's I'll make sure my team does that. Guys, you heard it here. Go check out my main man Jeremy Slate's book, Unremarkable to Extraordinary. You can pre-order it now and get all those freebies. And anything else you'd like to promote, or anywhere else people can find you?
I'm at Jeremy Ryan Slate everywhere, man. So I use my middle name because my parents named me after an actor. So I was doomed to not be found in Google. So I'm Jeremy Ryan Slate everywhere.
All right, you guys, go check out Jeremy Ryan Slate. Check out his book, Unremarkable to Extraordinary. And obviously, go check out the Create Your Own Life podcast. Great podcast. There's a great episode from fall of 2020 with myself. And we'll put that in the show notes. But yeah, you got a ton of great guests, and you're a great interviewer. So man, Jeremy, it's so good having you on the show, brother. I appreciate you being here.
Hey, thank you so much for having me, man.
All right, guys. Peace out. See you later. Love you. Bye, guys.